Now, if you were chomping at the bit a little bit, going, okay, that was nice. Now I have a desktop. You said this was going to be faster, and we've just spent an hour setting up our desk. Well, now it's time to get off to the races a little bit to look at the power of the resource tools that are found here. And these are the most powerful tools anywhere. There are a lot of Bible programs out there, and I've worked with a ton of them, PC Study Bible, and there's some more specialized resources for studying Greek and Hebrew. As far as an overall basic resource for digging into the Greek and Hebrew, for studying at if you're trying to put together your Sunday school lesson for your kids and you want to make sure that you are properly communicating the word of truth, these tools are incredibly powerful. They are tools that up until the last, really maybe 50 years, people would spend their whole lives trying to put together one resource like this. And for example, using something like how many grew up using the Strong's Concordance? That's what you started with. You were looking at that thing, trying to. Okay, what we're going to look at takes the kind of study you could do with the Strongs, and maybe even that you're doing now, cracking open some of those books. It takes it and ramps it up to the point where you can do those kinds of studies that would have taken you 3 hours, 4 hours, a couple of days you're working through it. I mean, you can get all of that information in the space of 15, 20, 30 minutes, right? And we want to do that so that we can then begin to analyze it after, and streamline our discovery of the information, so we spend more and more time in the text itself, more and more exposure to a broader range of biblical texts, and then we get to spend more time actually analyzing the flow of and the understanding of the text itself, as opposed to all the time flipping pages using the resources. That's the value of this, so that you can free yourself from busy work that you don't need to do to focus on the work that you really need to do. Lots and lots of reading of the text. And I'll say that over and over. The best way to study the Bible is not to have Logos in that sense. It is to read the Bible over and over and over, to understand it by reading it in context. You should it would be my prayer that all of you would be reading through the Word of God consistently. You would then be reading smaller chunks consistently. It's not an either or. And studying individual texts is wonderful, and you need to do that. You need to drill deeply down. But if you aren't gaining an overall perspective of the Word of God from beginning to end, you are always limited. So the best preparation for good Bible teaching and preaching is reading the Bible a lot with a general and basic understanding of what the words mean. You won't understand all the theology. So I want to constantly pound that home. The Scripture can be understood. The Spirit of God, not the Spirit of Logos, is what ultimately enables you to understand it. It's just these tools that are helping us in the basic understanding of the text and the words, so that those principles, the Spirit of God illumines to our heart and mind, so that we can properly teach them. And being immersed in the Word and reading the verses over and over is the best way to study. Because then you're getting ever increasingly familiar with what your text actually says. And so you'll see I'm going to combine a little bit of a study method, just because the way I've designed the resources lends to that. You may not study in this particular method. It matches up very well with what Tom teaches as he walks his way through a Bible study method, with what you'd learn at Masters, or it's not exactly that, but it's close. But you don't have to do the method, but I do want to show you how to use the tools, and you will need to develop your own method so that the tools are used wisely. Again, think of it this way. If you don't have any method for study, this is what most people do. They think, I got to teach Sunday school on Sunday. That's when you would teach Sunday school, and it's Monday. And you sit down, okay, what do I do? And you get distracted, and then it's Tuesday, then it's Wednesday. And every time you approach it a little bit differently. Every time you approach it, okay, now it's Saturday and I haven't done much, and so you just kind of jump in and you start doing something. I would urge you that you would have a particular way to study, and that's kind of what this desktop does, having the various resources, and that you would hone that method of study over and over, so that the method of study becomes automatic. The meaning of Scripture is never automatic. You always have to learn, you have to grow and deepen. It's not that. But the way you approach it is. There's no value in constantly revamping the way you're approaching your study, because you get lost in the process every time. It'd be like running to the bookshelf, grabbing a book, it's not the right book, going to get the next one, studying for 20, that's not the way. You want to get your study method down so that you don't spend your time opening and closing books and wondering what the next step that you're going to use is. You want to know those steps, and you want to do those steps over and over and over so that you can properly understand your text in a shorter amount of time with a greater depth of understanding. If there's anything you learn from this class, nothing about Logos itself, that you would have a consistent method. Whether you are teaching 50 people or 100 people or 500 people, or you're teaching your 5 or 6 kids that are part of your Sunday school class, or whether you're teaching your family, the way to study the Word, you should have a method so that you can properly and accurately interpret the Word. So with that being said, one thing I'd like to do to see if it's going to be possible and see how many of you can do this, I'd like you to try to download a workspace. This is kind of separate from the next section. So I want to see how many of you can do it this way. If you will go to your guides section, that's up at the top in the middle where it says guides. Click on the guides and work down. Does everybody have a workflow? Probably not a started workflow, but does anybody have a workflow section? Okay, raise your hand if you have a workflow section. Okay, that's a good start. All right, next, does anybody who has a custom workflow section? Anybody? Okay, only 2 of you. All right, let's try this. Down at the very bottom, it says get more shared. It should say guides and workflows. Everybody see that? All right, click on workflows and let's see what happens here. Give it a second. All right, I'm hoping that you're going to it's going to open up a window and that this is going to show up. Giving it some time. Did that show up for anybody for whom did that show up when they clicked on workflows? Most everybody. Some of you. You were probably still waiting. It opened up mine right next to the exegetical guide on the left-hand side, and you should see those names. All right. By the way, John Fallahy is one of the primary teachers of Logos. He graduated from seminary with me. If you ever have questions, call John. I don't have his number. You will notice down you should be able to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the list. There's a Nathaniel Simmons. All right. Who sees Nathaniel Simmons? Okay, some of you. If you don't see Nathaniel Simmons, raise your hand. Okay. I don't know why some of you do and some of you don't. Maybe Josh can look around and see if... Okay. If you can see Nathaniel, you'll notice Nathaniel has 4 workflows. Nathaniel goes to, by the Lord's grace, he came here for a long period of time, and then I stole him from you so that he oversees all of our men's training and schooling, essentially. So he wrote these workflows. If you click on Nathaniel, I'm hoping that will come up our 4 workflows: SI exegetical, biblical poetry, SI narrative, and SI exegesis exposition. Okay. Who is seeing those workflows? 2 of you, 3 of you, a few more. Okay, it's a good sign. Now see if you can get them. So here's what I want you to do. The one that's most important for us today is the SI exegetical workflow. All right? When you click on that, or when you float over that, and you right-click on it, up here it should say add to your docs. Does that happen? Very good. Click on that, and it should add that workflow to your Logos program. Okay, so I'll do it again. So when I right-clicked on it, then right up here it said add to your docs, and do that for all of them. So right-click on them and add them to your docs. This is a good... What's that?
If I don't have
any of those.
Simmons in my office.
Yes, then somehow your computer system doesn't like him. So Nathan is done. Maybe refresh it. It's not essential that you have this for today. We will find it. We'll figure out a way to get it to you. If you couldn't get it today, there's also, you can go to the Countryside. Let's see, it's countrysidebible.org/resources and a link to these workflows. What's that? Okay, sorry. countrysidebible.org/logos or logos, and just that. Yes.
We found it by typing SI in the find search bar.
Okay.
So type SI and space.
All right, so type SI space if you couldn't find Nathaniel, and hopefully those will show up. Do we get it?
Okay, right now we can go to the names then.
That's fine. All you need is those 4. You don't need a name. And you should be able to right-click on those. I'm going to use those at the very end. They're very powerful, and they'll help. Essentially, those are going to cement everything I've said. Those are the notes for everything that I've said tonight, those workflows. All right. Who has downloaded the workflows? Added them to your docs, you think, at least. Okay, many of you. All right. Let's, and when we come back around to it, you'll find out if you did, and if not, then after tonight, we can sit with you or after we're finished and make sure you get those downloaded, because we need to move on. All right, and we'll use those in just a bit. So now you can get rid of that particular window, and you're back to your 3 windows there. All right, now I'd like to talk a little bit about a method by which you will use these tools. And in doing so, I'm gonna move through. I'll be referencing various portions of Bible study. I'm not going to flesh them out because I want to move to the strength of the tools themselves so that you can see how they work. What we'll begin with is really starting with, let's say we're going to study a passage. And for the sake of tonight, I'd like to study Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. Now, I'm going to do something that you don't have to do. And if you have a larger laptop, that's why I get the big Battle Axe laptop, you can do it. If not, you can just toggle back and forth. So what I want you to do is I want you to open up whatever your word processing program is, open up a blank document. Okay, so whatever if you use Word, or if you use Google Docs, or if you use whatever you use, if you use Notepad, whatever you use, open up a. So for example, I use Microsoft Word, and I have a document that I have opened up. And I've called it, you don't have to title it with anything, Ephesians 6, 1 through 4, we're going to look at. So you have a Word document. Right now, yours is just blank. Right now, what I do as I study is I take my, get rid of that. I take my entire program, and if you just throw it over to the right, then it takes up half your screen. And I go in the toolbar up here, and I throw that over to the left, and now I have a split screen that shows me both my study document and my research document. Now, what you do if you can't do that, so you just full size LOGOS, then all you have to do is when you want to look at your down on the bottom, however your computer works, if you have a Mac or whatever, you'll find your Word document. You click on that, you pick the right one, and then you can start working in that. And then when you click back here, you're back to your LOGOS. So however you want to arrange your space, I like arranging my space so I can see both. Some of you want to look all at your resource, then you're going to make copy, paste, and then you're going to click on your document and copy it into there. However you want to do it is fine. And if you have the big screen, it's helpful to do it this way. This will help kind of show you what I'm doing though. So if you can't do both, it's too small, you'll be toggling back and forth between your LOGOS Bible program and your Word document. Now, there are a series of resources in which you can study within LOGOS. That is, you can do notes, you can do sermon prep. My general recommendation is don't do that. Why? And it's probably less true than it was 5 to 10 years ago when they would keep updating the versions, and every time they changed the version, they changed the way it accessed particularly notes, and oftentimes you could lose your notes or anything that was found. Now, it's much less clunky these days. It may be that now when you do stuff in LOGOS, you'll never lose it. However, I want the stuff where I have control over it when I'm writing a sermon or I have my research, so I put it in my word processing, and then I save that in my file system wherever I want it so that I can access it. It can get very complex trying to find your notes in LOGOS, trying to find your sermons there. Do it however you want. Yes, Josh.
So the sermon builder, if we get to that, you can just export the whole thing.
Yes, and so right. So you can use the what's in here particularly for the sermon builder, and then copy it all out. Right? I don't use sermon builder, and actually at some point I think Josh is just starting to use it. Some others of you might. You could do a class on that, showing you how to use it. I build my sermon entirely in a different in the research documents that I have. All right, so I start with a research document. It would be generally, I have a format, and again, however you want to study, where this is a particular template that I have in Word, that every time I open up a research document, it then is a new template that has translation, which we're not going to do tonight, diagram and outline, and then it has lexical and syntactical. You could design it however you want. I can also have these templates that I can give to you if you want them. So that, again, every time you are beginning your study, you are starting with a common template of how you do that study. It might not be the way that I do it, but This is how I do it. So I open up a document, it's a research document, and then I'm going to use all of my Logos resources to populate or fill out this document. So if we're going to study Ephesians 6, 1-4, then you would go to so toggle or just go to the right and go to Copy Bible. All right, so everybody go to Copy Bible and type in your line there, Ephesians, and there's a variety of ways you can abbreviate 6, 1-4. Okay, and there you have it. I have it in the format. Notice that I have it in a sermon format. I don't want it in that format. Because when I copy it over to use it in my research, I don't want any of the formatting. So now I'm going to go, still in this Copy Bible, from sermon quotation, I'm going to click and I'm going to go to Bible text only. And notice that it changed the formatting of my Bible text. So now when I copy it into Word, it doesn't have any formatting with it at all, so that I can manipulate it the way that I want. So try finding I think everyone has the Bible text only copy, switch to that, and then we're going to copy. So if you hit right here where it says copy, you hit copy, you go here, place it above this, say it's blank, and I'm going to paste it in. And so there you have it. So everybody copy it into your Word program. All right, who has not been able to copy it into Word or your Bible program? Okay. Now from there, again, however you do your study, there'll be different ways, but at least you've got your text. What I'm going to do here is I'm putting it over into this document so I can break it down into various words that I can study, and then the words that I study, I can place the information about those words underneath the word or phrase that I'm studying. That's why I've chosen this particular method, so I don't get lost, and I know exactly where my study is, and I know where to put all the pieces of my study. So for example, if you just copied this over and then started writing down observations about the text, that's fine. But the problem is when you start using your Logos and all the resources cross-reference off a particular verse or a particular word, you're loading it all underneath that text you have at the top, and you don't really know where it goes. So I think it's very helpful to have your text, and then what I do is I break it down, so that particular text, and then you can just manipulate that text. So if you were going to block diagram it, children, all right, so there you have your first subject, you have your first verb, obey, and then you have your direct object, obey whom, your parents, how, in the Lord. Now, some of you have done block diagrams, some of you haven't, but it doesn't really matter because what you're doing is just logically following the flow of your text. Sometimes it's easier than others, right? And you're ending up with something, and notice that then I can manipulate it without any of the formatting there, and I can begin to get an understanding of how the text flows, and then eventually we'll end up looking something like this, where I have a very simple block diagram using subject, verb. However much you know of English, you're like, I think that related to that, so I just move it over and stick it underneath that. All of you, by the way, are grammarians because nearly all of you, and I haven't heard you all talk, but nearly all of you can put together sentences that make sense. You have subjects and verbs, and you have descriptors and modifiers. You know what those things mean. When you're looking at the Bible text, that's what you're doing. Yes, it's helpful to have some more technical training to know, okay, how does a direct object relate to your subject? But you don't have to be able to know what those things, the labels, you just know that they relate together. So that's kind of what I do. I'm breaking it down into a kind of a visual outline of this particular passage, okay? Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, I'm still not using my tools yet. This is just, I'm doing this kind of, for lack of a better term, seat of the pants. All right, and this is something you don't have to go to seminary to be able to put together a block diagram and say, oh, that subject goes with that verb and that prepositional phrase goes underneath that. You've probably taught your kids how to do that. So you do it the best you know how. Because the study method is going to keep you from making mistakes. As you work your way through, you're going to realize, oh, that word does not relate to that word the way that I thought it did. Right? That particular verb actually relates to a verb up here. But you didn't figure that out because you're such a great grammarian. You looked at all of the tools and they said, you're wrong. And you said, okay, I'm wrong. I'm doing it this way. So the tools will protect you from making bad mistakes, but you are the ones that ought to be manipulating the text. Look at it, as in moving it around, not out of order, by the way. That's something I don't recommend. You can do this a variety of ways. I recommend keeping it in order and just moving things at various levels to see where they relate. Anyway, that's for another day, all the ins and outs of it. But then what I do in some way, and this is how I choose to do it. Obviously, you might do it differently. But so that I have some way of knowing, here's the Bible text, And then I'm going to be adding all of this information about each of the words or phrases. If I don't have some way to know what's the Bible text and what's all the stuff I'm adding, I get lost. So I highlight each of the words or phrases that I'm going to be studying. I highlight them in blue. I put a little colon after that. There's a variety of ways to do that. What you'll find is if you just took this text here, all right, that you did the block diagram, and if you go, for example, in Word, if you go to your highlight and you click blue and you click, you can just go down and highlight each one of those individual words. It's pretty cool. And then when you do your study of those words, all the information is going to go underneath it, and you're going to have your blue word standing out like a sign to say, here's the word, here's all of the study that you did on that word, or here's the phrase, so you don't get lost in your study. So you don't have pages and pages of things either written or copied that you don't know what they relate to. So you can do this however you want, but this is one way to get that done. And so I just took the block diagram that I had, I highlighted those words. Oh, by the way, I copied it, and then I moved it down. Why? Because I want to be able to look at my original block diagram. Okay, how did I originally see what the outline was? And then when I start moving down to put all the information, I want to be able to go back to just the clean text and see what I had before to see if I got the diagram or the outline correct. So I'll copy what was there. I'll copy all of this. I'll copy it down here, and then I'll put the blue highlight on it. Okay? Now you're going to see why we did that in just a second. And again, however you want to do it, however you want to arrange your words, however you want to do your study, just find some way to get your phrases and your words that you're going to be studying in your research document, and then we'll look at all the information about each one of those particular words or phrases, and we'll start there. All right, so we've broken that down, and we will look at, now we're going to begin essentially a word study. Now, if you're here and you're more advanced in your study, one of the things that one of the things that I encourage you to do is at the very beginning on this outline phase is to maybe give it a shot at writing a brief outline. You're looking at the text, you divide it up, so maybe you would say this is, again, it's a fly by the seat of your pants outline. You're looking at the text, you've laid out some of the diagram pieces of it, but you're just trying to get an idea in your mind what is going on in the text. So instructions to children. And just looking at your verbs. Well, there's a verb that says obey. There's a verb that says honor. All right, you go down here, and so, instructions to fathers or maybe parents. Okay, so what I will often do is just get an initial feel for the passage is I'll just write out an outline that just directly reflects the language. Here's why I do that. Because so often you're looking at a passage and you start asking questions about the passage. That's how we're taught to do it, and that's right and good. But if you have no idea what the flow, if you're not trying to think through the flow of the passage at all, and okay, what is relating to what at the very beginning, you're oftentimes not even asking the right questions. Now, this comes with time. I've been doing this for a lot of years, so outlines come more easily. But for most everyone, if you're just looking at where did it change? Where did something about this instruction change? What's different? And just put an outline point. Just put something there. Because what it's doing is it's giving you an initial feel for how the text is flowing, just that you're getting from your own observation. Then you're going to start asking all kinds of questions and writing stuff in, and you're going to revise that outline because you might, again, be totally wrong. There might be one command, not three. There might be 8 commands, not 2. And the things that but if you don't start, essentially what you're doing is you kind of turning your brain off at the beginning, and you're letting all of the study guide everything you do as opposed to thinking it through before, and then the study informs what you're thinking about the text. So do what you can to get maybe a bit of an outline. And then oftentimes I'll copy that outline. So some of those headings would be down here in this lexical syntactical. I didn't choose to do it that way this time, so it was more clean. But you're operating then according to a basic outline. And then I leave that original outline up on top there, add in all my lexical information, and I can keep looking back and saying, I got that wrong to begin with, or where was I in this text? All right, now let's get to asking questions of our text or of our individual words. All right, so, and by the way, you can break this down. Sometimes you'll want individual words broken down. Sometimes you will want a phrase I do try to break it down as much as possible, because if you have a phrase, let's say I just left children obey your parents in the Lord, right? Kind of that first command. So I'm going to study that phrase, because you have to know what the whole thing means. Well, the problem is if you are putting your lexical syntactical information, all of your information you're learning, if you're just dumping it underneath there, then you're not sure, again, which piece of your information relates to which word. So what I'll often do is I'll break it down into a lot of individual words, and then at the end of those words, I will write out, okay, then you put it together, this is what the phrase means. All right, but you need all of the pieces. What kind of child are we talking about? Older, younger, babies, not. What kind of cultural baggage is bound up in the way and whatever particular word is being used here? So if you just kind of do it phrase by phrase, oftentimes you'll miss the importance of individual words. Now the problem is, sometimes you'll think individual words are so important that you just go on rampant word studies all day long. Man, I know a lot about children, but I don't have any idea what children obey means. Right? So you have to link the words together, but this can be helpful to break these individual words down so you can get your information about them and understand them more clearly. All right, now let's begin to study our text. So we copied it over. Now back over here in Logos, we will get to Ephesians 6:1. Use Ephesians 6:1. You have your text that you're studying. By the way, interestingly enough, notice what's already happened. Ephesians 6:1 through 4. I've read the text as I was, this is the text I'm going to use. When I copied it, I'm reading the text. Then when I came over here and I was block diagramming the text, I'm just interacting. Okay, children, obey, parents, Lord, this is right. I'm thinking through the text. Then I copied it again and I looked at each of those individual words. And even as I was highlighting those individual words, what was happening? I was reading them. So again, I'm just over and over and over reading the words of the text. Now as we study them, we're going to be continuing to do the same thing, just expanding out the Bible verses that we read about them. All right, so if we're going to study children obey your parents in the Lord, we have our base text, we've copied it, we have some way to get our information. Now the first thing that you're going to use in your study is the exegetical guide. Now on mine, you notice that because there's a shorter amount of space, you don't have the word exegetical guide, but you have PG passage guide, and the one on the far right is your exegetical guide, and you're going to click on that. All right, so if everybody clicks on the exegetical guide, notice that it is linked to Ephesians. It's linked to my base text, my New American Standard text. And so it brings up for me a whole series of information about Ephesians 6:1. Now, some of these things you don't want, all right? So for now, and that's one of the neat things about this guide, you can customize it. So textual variants, where it doesn't have anything on that, all right? So we don't want to look at textual variants right now, all right? So we're going to get rid of that. That clears up a lot of the clutter. All right, so anytime the triangle it's a triangle, so it's an arrow pointing to the right. When the arrow points down, you have all the information. If you click on that little left arrow, it gets rid of all that. That'll do that in nearly every pane in Logos, all right? Now notice that it is providing me with a ton of information about this verse and what we call the word by word, right? Now, I think for most of you, I think Logos finally fixed it. So then the word by word, if you go to settings on the right, and notice what happened. For the word by word, you don't see anything there, right? Notice that when I went up and was when I was in the same sphere as that gray menu appeared, and it gave you a settings button. So I click on settings, and I want to make sure that it says show all words and show all parts of speech. Okay? So on your word by word, after you open your passage guide, you then have it show you all the words and show you all the parts of speech. All right, is there anyone who was not able to get to word by word for Ephesians 6:1? Anybody? Is everybody there? Okay, now what I often do, because I'm going to do word by word for the whole section, I'll go to Ephesians 6:1 through 4. So up in the verse reference box, okay, the link got me to Ephesians 6:1. I'm going to expand that so I can see all of the verses, and then it's going to give me information about all of them. All right? Now, let's consider how best to use this information. First, we have the Greek, which some of you are like, yeah, the Greek, I know Greek. Good. Most of you, we don't know Greek. But notice what happens. See, you want to be a Greek scholar. I wonder what Greek word is underlying the word children. Well, if you move your little cursor there, it says that's tatekva, and you might pronounce it differently. We can battle over that later. Notice that when the tekva is highlighted, notice that also children is highlighted. So that Greek word corresponds to that English word. That's what's cool about this. So you are learning Greek as you work your way through, and you've never even been to seminary. This is a verb, upakoete, and it means to obey. Now, of course, this is in its verbal form. That is, it is conjugated. It has all of the verb endings and things that you need as particular. That's communicating information. But the bottom line is that Greek verb, that big long thing, is the word obey. Right? Then we could do. This isn't pointing out articles at this point. So ta is an article, the child, and then it has here the parents. But you could work your way through, and even there's kind of showing you which Greek word relates to which English word. That way you can do the study. So now we'll work our way down. Notice it gives the article here, ta, and you're not going to learn a ton of really exciting things about the article, so we're going to let that aside. Now, it's obviously meaningful that it's articular, right? That adds to our understanding. But right now we're not particularly worried about the grammar structure. We just want to know what the word children means. So we go down here. It shows us what the Greek word is, but it also shows you the English word. That's the word you're studying, right? So for the word children, the root word of children, without any of the endings on it, is teknon, child. So we want to study, all right, in the Greek New Testament, right, this word teknon, which here is translated child, we want to know how that's used in the Greek New Testament to understand the meaning of the word. Now, before we go and look at all of the places it's used in the New Testament, notice we get some information here that is given to us immediately. Right? We're told it's a noun. It's a plural noun, which was obvious to us in English. Sometimes it isn't, but children, right? And that's about probably all that you want to know right now, all right? You don't need to know much more grammar than that. It's nominative, which means it's in the place of the subject, but here we have noun, and it's a plural noun. Now, Logos right up front will give you a sense. This is generated by really the designers of Logos itself. Generally, child. Son, daughter of any age, sometimes referred to collectively as children. Now, it's not super deep, and understanding what child is not going to be incredibly significant because we generally know what that is. But this sense, be careful because it's not based on any particular Greek resource that is we know to be reliable. They've just kind of come up with what they think is their sense. So we're going to have to study further than that. How many of you have this MCEDONTW? Did anybody have that as their first one? Okay. One of you, two of you. All right, that's if you purchase that resource and then you prioritized it comes up first. Many of you who has BDAG, okay, a bunch of you that might be your first one. All right, so that's just going to give you some additional information from the word dictionary about what that actually means. So if you click on BDAG, it's going to open that up in your bottom right window. At least it did for me. So it's going to open up here. So I want to make that bigger. So here's another thing you can do. Notice it's like it opened up a book, but now I need to see the book more fully. So I'm just going to drag that window. I'm going to resize it for this study so I can see how this word is used. Right? An offspring of human parents, a child. This isn't giving me all of these, and then it's going to give me a series of places where this word is used. Right? It's used oftentimes without reference to male or female. It's going to give me a series of senses in which this word is used. But really, all I'm looking at this for is for the basic definition right here. If you have a dictionary that's a little bit more gives you more information, right? So this Mounce's dictionary, when I clicked on that, 99 times it's used for a child, a son or a daughter. It's used for descendants or posterity. It's used for inhabitants of a particular place, a certain kind of people. So now, if you have a dictionary that's a little more expanded, you're going to get more information about this particular word, right? So that's the word child. I'm not going to spend much more time on child because it's not a particularly significant word. But now let's go down to your first verb, which is obey. All right, so we want to know, again, in English, this is not a particularly controversial word. We know pretty much what it means. You do what is being said. But we want to understand, again, in Greek, what Greek word is being used here and how would we want to understand that? So by the way, here we have the grammar information. It's a verb. It's a present active verb. Interestingly enough, it's also an imperative verb. So this is a command, right? Children, obey. This is not a suggestion, right? It's not, oh, children, obey. It's not describing information about what children do. It is telling you that this is what children are to do. And more of our study will reveal that. It's an imperative verb. Right? Sense here, to obey is to be obedient to. So we can look at some of the dictionaries again. Right? But now we want to work our way towards, so you might get a basic definition. And let's say I'm like, okay, to be obedient to, that's, again, that's pretty basic. Here are some for BDAG. Let me open that up. Here are some, some synonyms: to follow instructions, to obey, to be subject to. So maybe I want to copy that into my study document, because I just want the basic definition. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You could right-click, and you could copy it, and you come over here for obey, and underneath I might put to follow instructions, to obey, to obedient, to follow, to be subject. Right? Oftentimes what I will do is I will write in the transliterated form of the word, which is, and the reason I do that is hypakuo, hupakuo, there's several different ways to pronounce this in this case, is when even if I didn't know Greek, if you don't know Greek, you start to see words, and when you pronounce them, you begin to get familiar with words that are familiar or that are used a lot of times in the Greek language. There's words, and this is a particularly common verb. So sometimes I'll put in just the transliteration of it, even though you don't, knowing Greek is, you don't have to do that. And that helps me pronounce it so that then I can get a feel for that word when it comes up in more places. So obey, it's that particular Greek word. Now you can also, if you wanted, if you're like, no, I want the Greek word. I don't want the transliteration. You could copy it here. Oops, actually I don't think you can copy it out of here. So I would go here. I can copy it out of my dictionary. If you wanted to see what the Greek word was, and you wanted to put it in your study notes. And again, one of the reasons for that might be if you see it in commentaries, you have a familiar, you know what it looks like. Anyway, so you could do that. You could have some more technical information in there. Then you have an initial basic definition of what that word means. I will oftentimes put in the basic information about the verb. So you could copy it, or you could say that's a present, active, imperative verb. Now you can change, later on you can change your fonts back to everything Times New Roman 14 or whatever. So I've just found some basic information. I know what the Greek word is, I know what the nature of the verb is. It's a present tense, it's an active verb, and it's a command, it's imperative. And I've gotten a very brief definition of it. Okay, so I found out that information. Next, I want to find out where this particular word or how this particular word is used elsewhere in the New Testament. So here's where the real power comes. Right? All these dictionaries is helpful. I would have had to look up each one without this. But if I go here, right up to the again the blue hyperlink word here, notice that what shows up is immediately a little wheel, and the wheel is the power of logos. Right away, it tells me that this word is used 21 times in the New Testament. This verb, it is translated obey or obey. The blue is how many times, the vast majority of times it's translated obedience, and in one or two cases it's translated answer. But so I'm looking at it, I'm getting a sense of it, but I want to know more, so I'm going to click on the upakuo, or hupakuo, as you might want to pronounce it, and it's going to pull up for me here in a totally invisible place this powerful wheel. So here's what I'm going to do. Here's a new thing for you. So go down to this particular pane. All right, the three little dots here, click on those, and then do something called float this panel. So it will pop that out for you right over there so you can see it more clearly. All right, so did everybody try that? Okay, so we'll try that again. I'll do the whole process again. So I went to upakuo, or hupakuo. I clicked on the hyperlink. It opened it up over here on the right-hand bottom portion. I went to the three little dots. It's got the BWS here, Bible Word Study. Okay, right there. Go ahead now and get this bigger for you, so that will help. Okay, so I did here, and then I clicked over here. I did float this panel, and that pulled it out so I could see it more easily. Yes?
You just right-click on Bible Word Study, it'll give you that command right on top.
To float it? Sure. Okay, so you can also, we'll do it that way. So you had Bible Word Study, which was, let me get my Bible Word Study, so it's here. If you right-click here, you can also float this, open a floating window. Okay, so you can do it that way as well. All right, now this is giving you tons of information. So this tells you again, shows you the little wheel. What I want to do here is, I want to look at the Bible verses where this particular Greek word is translated. So I'm going to look at all the places in the New Testament where the word obey is used. That's going to give me a broad context of how this word might be being used for children, right? The context in which they are to obey. But also it's just going to give me a general understanding of obedience when this word is being used in the New Testament. Right? So you have obedience to Christ. You have the wind and the sea obeying him. Right? So you could work your way down through all of these verses, and you're reading through them to find verses that might be applicable to your particular context. Okay? So, as you're working your way down through, here's another one, Colossians 3:20, children be obedient to your parents in all things. We have another verse on obedience, the same word is being used, it's translated a little bit differently. And so I'm starting to learn tons of things about this particular verb, and I'm doing so with one click of the button, and I'm reading through all these texts quickly, looking to see which verses will help me understand obedience and which verses will help me understand obedience better in this particular context. Because remember, every place that Greek word is used, the context is dictating the kind of obedience that's happening and the way that the obedience is happening. So it's not exactly the same as what's happening necessarily with children obey your parents in the Lord. So you're helping determine that as you read through these particular verses. Now, let's say I wanted to put one of them out. Here's a good, essentially, cross-reference, Colossians 3:20. Now I'm going to copy that verse. Okay, so Logan, here's where you were asking how to copy. So, yes?
So I don't have those cross-references, but I also don't have the strong support.
So you don't need it. So how I got those, by the way, I forgot to tell you this. So I clicked on the middle of that wheel. All right? So I went to the middle of the wheel, and I clicked on it, and I got all the different senses. Did you get it? Okay. Oh, that was the secret that I forgot to tell you. Like, how did he get that? The most important thing. Now, also notice if I just go over here and I click on this piece of the wheel, it's going to show me only those words which are translated, that particular verb, Greek verb is translated obey. If I go here, this one where it's translated answer, it's going to show me just that verse where it's answer. If I click in the middle, it's going to show me every place, every different way that word is translated. Okay? Yeah, that's pretty cool. And that's, if you could do a Strong's Concordance, you would be working your way through the word, right? Looking up the Strong's number, G, 57732, then looking in your Strong's Concordance, it gives you a little piece of it, going to that text, reading that text, writing it down. Here we are, we looked at all of them, we found them right away. It is every one of the words linked, the underlying Greek word linked to that English word in all of its different contexts, and you have it right here. Now, if you want to grab one of those words and copy it, you can. The way I do it is you right-click on the reference. Okay, Colossians 3:20, that's the one I want. So I'm going to right-click on that reference, and this window is going to open up. Okay? Now, it didn't used to do this. It used to just, if I did that, and then I went over into my thing, I could just copy it. So this has driven me a little crazy. And you can maybe help me if anybody knows how to do this differently. There's now several different ways to copy it. Notice here. I can copy it in a styled fashion. I can copy it, I don't even know what lines is. I can copy it text only. Lines is just going to put each line of the verse on separately. I can copy it text only. Now here's what happens if I copy it in a styled fashion. And here I'm going to go back to all right, get my floated panel. And by the way, if your floated panel disappears, it's down on the bottom. It's down here. If you click on Logos, you'll see you have your general program, and then you have your floated panel that got stuck over there. Right, when I right-clicked on my Logos, it says I could copy it in styled. All right. And it is right now copying. So if I want to, it didn't copy it styled. That's interesting. Hang on. Maybe my cursor was somewhere else. No. All right. Well, I'm going to show you how. I don't want to copy it in styled. Here's what we're going to do. I right-click, and I'm going to click on this one that says More. When I click on More, it brings me over to the copy Bible. And notice what happened to me as I did before. It has Bible text only because I forgot to change it. So I'm going to change that back to my sermon quotation. I'm going to hit copy, and I'm going to paste it into my document. Now, if I hit copy and paste, so you have that verse, and if I just hit this copy and paste here, it will copy it directly into my Word document without the 2 steps. All right? So we'll do that again. I was on my floated panel, which was here. I wanted Colossians 3:20, so I right-clicked on it. It gave me all of this information. I clicked on More because when I click on More, it is going to copy it in the way that I have told it to through my Bible copy program. I click on More, it shows up here. I hit copy and paste, and it puts it right in. Okay? Now, how many were able to do that copy? How many were not able to do that copy? All right? So maybe we could get some help for those because this is pretty important. You want to know how to do this. So we'll pause for a minute. Okay? Yeah, sometimes you're just missing one little piece of it. But I want you to know how to do this. By the way, you could change then the range of what you're copying. You could do Colossians. So let's say, okay, I want to do Colossians 3:20, but I want the context around that. So you would just go to Colossians 3:19 through 21, and then hit copy and paste, and it would put it into your. Oops, I forgot to hit 3:19 through 21. Hit enter, then hit copy and paste, and it puts the whole thing into your Word document. So it actually gets pretty quick if you do that right-click, hit More, and then hit copy. It goes pretty fast, and you can do a ton of those verses if you wanted. All right. Looks like we got most everybody. All right. But we're just getting started on the power of the wheel. Because, as you and I both know, oftentimes it's difficult to have a New Testament concept obey. But the Old and New Testaments are built together. And oftentimes a word that's used in the New Testament carries with it an Old Testament context, but it's a Greek word, and the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. So it's hard to know what the connection is between the Old Testament word and the New Testament word. Again, I'm using a very bland verb, kind of purposely. There's all kinds of verbs that I could use, right? But you will notice here, the next wheel is the Septuagint translation, the LXX. That is the Old Testament translation of the Bible in Greek, which was written about 200 BC, or was translated about 200 BC. And it appears, our best understanding is that it was generally the Bible that the apostles were using, that many of the people, many of them were actually referencing, at least at some levels, the Septuagint. Right? And so a lot of the Greek words, the way they are used when they were translating the Old Testament, will give us an understanding of how they understood that Old Testament, or that the Hebrew context, and how they were using the Greek word, so it will connect the Old and New Testaments together. So you will see that the Septuagint translates this word epikuo, all right, the equivalencies, right, are these particular, and you don't have to know Hebrew, but these Hebrew words that mean these particular things. All right. Now, if you really wanted to, you could look at the individual words or the verses. Notice they're in Greek. But there's a way around that. If you wanted to know how this word shim was being used in it's the Hebrew word that they used upakuo to translate. If you hover over it, it will show you the English translation of that. So you can work your way down and look and see how the word obey, translated with this particular Hebrew word, is used. But his mother said to him, you're cursed beyond me, my son, only obey my voice. Now, I'm not saying that right now you're learning lots of really deep information about obey. But think about on a particular verb like to know, yada. Well, it has in the Hebrew. Well, when it says that, or foreknow perhaps, in Romans 8, and it says that we were foreknown, whom he foreknew, he also predestined. Well, has a particular Greek connotation to it. But that word, if you trace that back into the Old Testament, you find that it doesn't have as much to do with knowing ahead of time as it has to do with having a relationship with. And so if you track that word back through into the Old Testament, which you can do with a tool like this, you will see that the majority of ways or times that it's translated in the Old Testament, it has to do with an intimate knowing, like Adam knew his wife. It's the same word that's used. Now, you got to be very careful in these studies that you don't come up with a whole new meaning for the word because you read 20 of the Old Testament references. But in your commentaries and as you're guided through, you can track back important words from old to new through this particular tool. Yes, Logan. Yeah. Oh, do I have a particular one? The one that comes with Logos. I don't know what version it is, and it's. I think it's great. Works well. I can look and see the version for you. Now, but there's one other thing. So you're like, okay, that's great. Now I can see, it's translated Hebrew words. Okay, that's not so helpful to me because here's a bunch of Greek. Now we got one more sense of this, which is super helpful. Oh, let me get rid of the wheel there. Yep.
Under Septuagint translation, mine is grayed out, so I don't see that wheel.
Okay, it may be that you don't have a Septuagint in your Logos library. And so, right, so at the end, I'll give you the recommendation on the one I think you should get. It's probably not expensive, would be my guess. So if that wheel is grayed out, it means that you don't have the underlying resource necessary for it. Which means you probably don't have this one either, but this is one of my favorites. Because now what it's going to do is it's going to give you a sense, or going to tell you the general senses in which this word is used. Generally, it just means, notice it's pretty basic, to obey, to do what you're told to do, to actually accomplish the action that you have been commanded. In this one sense here, it's to answer, as in you were answering a door. Who knows? You're obeying and answering the door. Who knows? But anyway, when it gives a sense translation, and there's another study that I did that this was more helpful in. But what it does is it just gives you, okay, and the way the word is used, its various senses, it divides it up into that. For example, a sense is a little bit like, we might call it, the word truth, for example, which we'll look at in just a minute. It can mean, the idea of truth can be a propositional statement that is true, and oftentimes it's used that way in the Bible. Also, truth can refer directly to the truth of the gospel, and so it has a unique meaning within its context. So what this particular tool does, it will break down the various senses or the ways in which a particular word is used. And it will look at a different verb in just a minute. But that's what this particular tool does. You read through these, you can copy over the ones that you want, and it's a very powerful way to look at a lot of Bible verses about the nature of that particular concept. All right, so that's your exegetical study. What you would then do is you would look at the word obey. You would look at parents, the idea of in the Lord. All right, that's probably the word kurios that's being used. In the New Testament, that's pretty standard. In the Old Testament, if you're looking at the word Lord, it would be more complex. What does honor mean? Those sorts of things. And if you did your study using this particular tool, looking at the various senses of the word, writing in the information, looking at the words that related words that are used in the New Testament for the same concept, you would end up with something that looks like this. Let me pull up another Word document for you. All right, so you would end up with something that looked a little like this. Okay, so there I had my various children, Who are they? Those are still in authority of their parents. Those still being supported by their parents. So notice that that's a rather broad definition of children. It's not just little kids. It's not only teenagers. It's very broad. It can be anyone who is still underneath the authority of their parents. And I learned that through the various things that I read and the things I looked at. To obey, what does it mean? It's present, it's active, and it's imperative. Okay, when you combine children and obey, it means that these are the things that your mindset is obedience. Some illustrations. Notice that from some of my places where the word obedience was used, I came up with some illustrations. Right? For example, the wind obeyed Jesus. Now, that's not the same context as a child obeying their parent, but it brought in a fascinating illustration. Imagine when Jesus told the very elements to obey him, they did it immediately. Now, when we tell our children to obey us, they don't. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had the same kind of obedience? You see, so even in studying the scriptures, I would never have thought of that illustration most likely unless I'd read another 50 verses on what it means to obey. But it didn't take me very long. And what was the issue? I was being immersed in the scriptures. Oh, by the way, how do the lexicons, those Bible dictionaries, how do they come up with a definition of a Greek word? They read all of the places in which that word was written in the New Testament, and they come up with a sense, and they write it down. And you are essentially doing that exact same thing. Now again, do we come up with any amazing thing about children? Okay, they're children. You don't necessarily come up with some new insight, but you read a lot of scripture about children and obedience, and you are immersing your mind in the truth. The value of word studies, hear me very carefully, is not coming up with some new, unique, wow, I know something about that word that John MacArthur doesn't know. He knows it, trust me. And it's pretty some of the definitions are very basic. You're not coming up with anything new. It does drive me crazy when someone will study a word and they're like, I think the word means. And the moment they say that, I'm like, they're going to bust out some really bizarre definition of the word, and nobody ever had that definition, and they read 50. Don't do that. Generally, what the word means is what BDAG said it meant. You just got a bunch of new information about the scriptures relating to that concept. Do you see what I mean? The power is not so much in the actual definition, because that's pretty basic for most things. The power was in knowing how that word is used and the concept, how it fleshes itself out beyond your particular passage. That's the value. Don't get stuck on word studies and give your sermon where you define every word and they're like, I knew what, the guy that's listening to you is like, and your little kids in your Sunday school, like, I kind of knew what a child was already. I knew what obedience meant. Don't wax eloquent. You just know a lot more about it, right? And that's very helpful for you. And you got a lot more scripture. All right, so for this entire passage, and there's a few more things we have to look at, all right? But I was coming up with, for each word and each phrase, you're finding the information, you're writing it in here, and I had my basic outline. So I already have the basics of a message. There's one other piece of information when it comes to your study that I want to show you back in Logos here. I'm going to get rid of the wheel. All right, so you've done your word study, right? And you've worked through all your words, all your phrases, anything that you needed, right? Anything that was, I didn't do a lot of looking up what the word is. It's a verb, it's a to be verb, it's a present verb, it's is. Okay, is. Right? Sometimes verbs mean a lot. So you just work your way down through. By the way, when I do my study, oftentimes I'll be looking at the exegetical guide and I'll still type it in. This is what it means. Present, it is to be, it's a state of being. I'll write that in just because it keeps it in my mind. But you don't have to write all that info necessarily. Next thing I'm going to do is cross-reference. Right? So this is a very powerful tool. I'm going to take my window that was on the far right, which was essentially my tools window. I'm going to move that down in size, and I'm going to go to my cross-reference window. Now, cross-references can be very dangerous because a lot of times we think, or you might think that a cross-reference means that the verses used in this cross-reference text mean the same thing or access concepts that are the same as are in your verse. They don't. Right? Essentially, the cross-reference is something that some scholar thought, okay, here are verses in Old and New Testament that might relate somehow to the idea of obedience or to the idea of children. It's not the same. It's not necessarily the same word being used. Right? So be very careful with the cross-references, but they can be very helpful. And I'll give you a little hint. If you listen to a John MacArthur sermon, right, and you track down first the word studies, and then you do something like this Treasury of Scripture knowledge study, right? So for example, And by the way, the treasury of Scripture knowledge is linked to the King James of all things, but I still find it most helpful. So the concept of obey is found, and I just do it this way. Genesis 28:7, Jacob had obeyed his father. Leviticus 19:3, every one of you shall reverence his father and mother, shall keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Now, a lot of this ground, some of it, you already covered when you looked at the way the word is used. Although oftentimes you didn't track it back into the Old Testament, so you don't, the cross-references really help you with the Old Testament, seeing some of the illustrations that are used there. But some of these verses you didn't find, right? You might think under obey here, you might, and I'm not saying this is exegetically significant, you might decide, wow, if any man is a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, well, you know what's coming after that, right? He ends up they drag him before the elders, and he gets stoned to death. You're like, now I need that, because that will help me give a negative example of what it means not to obey. So I'm going to grab that baby, Deuteronomy 21:18, I'm going to right-click it, I'm going to hit more, it's going to have copied it over here, and I'm going to hit copy and paste, and it's going to put that into my document. Right? I actually didn't brought in Ephesians 6:1. Oh, and I know why. Okay, so let me do that again. Deuteronomy 21:18. I right-click on the reference. Here's one extra step you have to do. Deuteronomy 21:18, Bible. All right? And they just added this, and this does drive me to distraction. Because what it's doing, it'll just do the selection. It'll just tell me the cross-reference from which this verse is drawn. But instead, I want to put 21:18 Bible. That means I'm going to actually copy the Bible text. Then I hit more. Then I have Deuteronomy 21:18, and then I hit copy and paste. So I'm going to work my way down through the cross-references for obey, for they have in the Lord, they have a cross-reference for that, all of the various things that they have. And I'm going to pull out the verses I think that help me understand the text or give me illustrations to the text. And what was my clue about John MacArthur? If you listen to his sermons or if you read his commentary, you can trace the same cross-reference path that he made as he walked through this study. I guarantee it. You'll do your cross-references, you'll pull out some neat cross-references, and you'll go to his commentary and you'll say, wait a minute. All those things I thought were these incredible insights, and again, not that he's not incredibly insightful, just simply that you thought, wow, how did he make that connection? Or where did he come up with that idea from this? He got it through the cross-references. Again, be very careful with this. You can end up with a reference that has nothing to do with your passage. Now, Deuteronomy 21:18 does. Got children not obeying their parents. Great one. Take that one to the bank. It's solid. And if you look in MacArthur's commentary, you'll find Deuteronomy 21 about third way down through his commentary on the passage, because he did the same thing you did. That's what he did. Right? So he worked his way down. He considered the concept. He had positives and negatives to the concept. He had all that information somewhere. He probably didn't dump it into a computer. I guarantee you he never did that. He kept it in his great brain and wrote it down and then told it to us. My brain isn't that big, so I write it down. So you worked your way through the cross-references. You worked your way through the underlying Greek word. You did your word and your phrase studies. You came up with all this information. You wrote it all out in whatever form you want to use. And you have the basis for lots of information. The last step that I do then, right, and you can do this before or after, right? And it just depends on when. Oftentimes, once I have that first outline done, I will then just go down through and write out, okay, here are my thoughts and my observations, right? Oftentimes, I will do that after I've done some of the word studies and some of the cross-referencing, because I'm still just reading the scripture. I'm not getting anyone else's interpretation of what it means, but that way I have more of an understanding of the passage when I start asking my questions. How do these relate together? Because I've already gotten some information about what the words mean about other places in Scripture. And then I just type. So I just type all my information out underneath. Okay, here's what I think it means. Here's questions that I have about the text. And you'll see some of that here as I'm just writing stuff out. Children have to be trained to obey and honor their parents by their parents. Book of Proverbs is full of that. Just a series of, let's see where I said, again, just a series of things that I might write down with a promise. And always denotes a special commitment to God to accomplish something. Generated by the nature of God, his desire to bring glory. I'm just writing comments about it and and this is not sermon, it's just all the things that I think or questions that are raised in my mind, thoughts that come. And then after that, I go to the next set of tools, which I'm going to give you, let's see what is it now, 8:16, I'm going to give you another 5-minute break. Then I'll go to my next set of tools, and we'll be working our way towards coming home.